We're now on Daf Pei Vav Amud Beis, Ushmuel Omer in the second line. Afilu Ksav Sofer V'Eid. You said, Rav, that it's got to be the Ksav Yodo of the Baal and an aid, and then the Vlad is kosher. I'm going to say that even if it wasn't the Ksav Yodo of the Baal, but it was the Ksav Sofer and an aid, the Vlad is not a mamzer. And why is that? Sharishonino, I have a proof from a Mishnah later on in Daf Pei Zayin Amud Beis. The Mishnah says Ksav Sofer V'Eid kosher. That a get that's written through the Sofer and another aid signs on the get is kosher. And we're assuming that when the Sofer signed the get, he knew that he had to get a mandate from the Baal in order to create a get lishma. He was a baki. The Rav. What is Rav going to do with that later Mishnah? Why doesn't he agree, based on that Mishnah, that we're talking in our Mishnah about Ksav Sofer, and the Ksav Sofer is considered like an aid? And the Gemara answers, me dummy. What is the scenario in the Mishnah later on? Hasam, when it says kosher, shetinasi l'chatchila. There she can get married even l'chatchila. But hacha, in our Mishnah, the get is possible l'chatchila, it's kosher only b'di'evet. Therefore, we have to assume that there are two different scenarios here. As the Gemara is going to explain later on in Daf Pei Ches, that the Mishnah there is talking about a case of Chasam Sofer V'Eid Echad. That means that the Sofer actually signed on the get, and he's mitztaref with the other aid, and therefore the get is kosher, even though there's no Ksav Yodo of the Baal, and the Ksav Sofer is enough. But here, the Sofer didn't sign at all. So they only have one aid, and therefore Rav holds that in our Mishnah, the get of Eid Echad must be written b'ksav yodo shel haba. Ushmuel, the Gemara asks, he brings a raya from that Mishnah. He must hold that in that Mishnah, the case is that the Sofer did not sign the get; it was only signed by Eid Echad. So why does the Mishnah say that l'chatchila the get is kosher? Our Mishnah says that we can only be machshir the get b'di'evet. And the Gemara answers lo kasha. It all depends on the Sofer. Even if he didn't sign as an aid on the bottom of the get, but he wrote the get with his particular style of safros, and he's a safra demuva. He knows he's a baki in the dinim of Gittin. He would never write a get unless he had received an explicit mandate from the Baal that the Baal says, I want to divorce my wife, and here I want to commission you to write the get. And therefore he's an Eid Sheni, because by virtue of the fact that he is writing the get, he is testifying implicitly that the Baal gave him a tzivui to write the get. And in that sense, he's no different than the other aid that's signed, and therefore the get is kosher l'chatchila v'ha. But in our Mishnah, is b'safra lo muva. Says Shmuel, we're not talking about a baki, an expert in the laws of Gittin. It's possible that he wrote the get, that he knew that something was cooking over there between the husband and the wife, and he never heard directly from the Baal that I want to divorce my wife and I want you to be commissioned to write the get. So therefore, he cannot be considered as an aid. You're only left with one aid, and therefore the get is possible. Rabbi Yochanan also says, "B'ksav yad shaninu." He accepts the sheet of Rav, the ksav yad shaninu, but the get that's written b'ksav sofer, that's not as good as ksav yodo. Even though there is an aid, the vlad is a mamzer. And Rabbi Lazar, we're going to see now, understood that according to Rabbi Yochanan, we're talking about a different scenario in our Mishnah, a get that has Eidim v'yemos man. So, Rabbi Lazar turns to Rabbi Yochanan, he says, "Arei yeshel of Eidim." What are you talking to me about Ksav Yodo or the Ksav Sofer? What are you talking about? None of this makes any difference because there are two Eidim signed in the get. Amalei, Rabbi Yochanan pointed out to Rabbi Lazar, you misunderstood me. A Sefer, I was commenting on the Sefer Mishnah in the case of a get yeshel bozman, The ein bo ella eid echad. It only has one aid, as we saw in the words of Rav earlier. Now, a woman who gets married with one of the Gittin psulim that we said before, we've vacillated over and over again, back and forth, whether teitze mi ba'al hasheni, lo teitze, do we bust up the second marriage? And now we're going to go through the sugya inside. Remember, the Gemara was always implying, but this is the real original sugya. Zimnin Amar Rav. On certain occasions, Rav would say that if in one of these three Gittin she went ahead and got married, teitze, we're going to bust up the second marriage. Zimnin Amar Rav lo teitze. Okay, so how do we reconcile these two apparently contradictory statements and views of Rav? Yesh lo bonim. If from the second husband she has children, we don't want to be motzi laws on the children that they're mamzerim, and therefore lo teitze will allow and recognize and validate the marriage to the sheni. But ein lo bonim, if she doesn't have children from the second husband, then teitze, we're going to bust up the marriage. Frankly, this requires a lot of study because Lefi Aniyas Daiti, it's very difficult. If you're saying teitze, right, in the case of Ein Lo Bonim, so you're saying that, the Bonim are Ksherim. How can you say the Bonim are Ksherim if you're saying teitze? I don't know. That's a pellet to me. Anyway, the Gemara is going to ask the fine kash on Rav. Mosiv Mar Zutra Bar Tuvia. We have a mission in Yevamos on Taf Lamed on the base for Kulon Shahibem Safik Kedushin or Safik Gerushin. So we're talking about one of the 15 categories of our rayos, and they patter up that tsaros, so that tsara doesn't need chalitza, and certainly not yibun. She's a tsaras erva. But let's say the marriage to the erva was a safek. Is Ariel Cholzos for Misyabmos? I mean, on the tzad that the marriage is valid, then she needs chalitza. If the marriage wasn't to the erva wasn't valid, then the tzara doesn't need chalitza. She's p'tur miklum. Kate said safek kedushin, zark la kedushin safek karv lo, zo safek kedushin. So if the kedushin was thrown and he came close to her, she's vade mekudeshes. If on the other hand it fell carved to him, vade ena mekudeshes. What's the case of safek gerushin? Kasav iksav yodo v'ein alav edim yesh alav edim ve'bozman yesh bozman ve'ein lo el ena. These are the three cases that we saw in our Mishnah where the Rabbanan passel the get. Harezes safek gerushin. This is called a safek gerushin. In other words, midaraisa she's megureshes. Mirabbanan, the get is possible, and therefore the tzara is nofeles liyiva midaraisa, because the get is chal doraisa, and she's no longer a tzaras erva; she's a regular yivam alashuk. But we're not allowing her to be misyabim midirabbanan. And in all these cases, the law is that the get is possible rabbanim nisei savlad kosher, and therefore there's no yibum, but obviously on a deraisa level, the get is kosher, and therefore she's not a tzara, but she requires a get. I'm sorry, chalit. So the Gemara asks the following kash. This is Mar Zutra's kasha. If you can tell me in the three cases in Amishlo Teitze, what does that mean? That if she married a second husband based on one of these three Gittin psulin, and she had children from the second husband, then what's going to happen is that people are going to come to the conclusion that the get is a kosher. The get is kosher because, you're not busting up the marriage to the sheni. It must be she got a valid get from the rishon. And then what's going to happen as a result of the fact that people are going to say that the get was chal, and that therefore we're not breaking up the marriage to the Sheni because she had children from the Sheni, lo tzila, is Tarasa Asyula Bumi. They're going to say, you know what? The Tzara is not a Tzoras Erev at all. And if she's not a Tzoras Erev, she falls for Yibum. They're going to be Miyabim her. And the reason they'll be Miyabim her is because they assume that the get was kosher. Sumar says, what are you talking about? Tis Yabim ve'bekachlu. Adarabah. If the Tzara had Yibum, we don't have to go crazy over that, because on a Deraisa level, these Gittin are valid Gittin, full-fledged Gittin Gemurah. And therefore, she is not a Tzoras Erev. And Yibum is not a problem. There's only Chashash D'Rabbanan. It's only that the Rabbanan established that the get is possible, l'chatchila, etc., etc. But we're not going to make a gzera that teitze, because there might be a yibum on the tzara, because that would be a gzera. Levi Amalil lo teitze. In all situations, even if she doesn't have any children from the second husband, and we don't have Rav's pressing fact of shalol hotzi las, nevertheless, lo teitze. We're not going to break up the second marriage. V'chein Amar Rabbi Yochanan lo teitze. V'chein Amalu Rabbi Yochanan b'nei Rabbi Chalafta d'Minhuna Hachi Amar Avuchan li'olam lo teitze. So Rabbi Yochanan communicates to the b'nei Rabbi Chalafta regarding a shmua that he heard from their father with regard to a woman who got divorced with one of these three Gittin, and then she got married to someone else. And the Gemara now is going to bring another statement or shmua of Rabbi Yochanan in the name of the father Rabbi Chalafta. The Torah says in Parshas Chukas, in Bamidbar Perek Yutes, that the Efer of a Parah Duma needs Kiddush b'mayim chayim. And we put the offer on mayim that are spring water that flow from the ground. They're not salty, they're not hot. The mayim has to be in a kli. If it's a makom shein a kli, then the mayim become possible for Kiddush Efer Parah. And there are psulim hamayim rabbanon in a case where he pours from one kli to another. And then there's another psul called hesech hadas, or if there was malacha done with the water. So Rabbi Yochanan adds another case, and this is what he tells Bnei Rabbi Chalafta: v'chein kartzis shebe amir eino poseles b'mei chatos. This chatzis is some sort of living creature that drinks the water. So the mayim, if they have a taroves of, call it the spittle of that chai, they become bottle and possible. But this chatzis is different. My chatz, what is chatzis? Rabbi did davta devene kipe. It's a big, large kind of a fly, like almost like a large grasshopper, that you can find amongst the omrim, amongst the sheaves. And even if this kartzis drank from the water is not possible. Masiv Rav Daniel Barav Katina Kalaofos Poslim B'mei Chatos. Any bird that drinks from the Mechatos, and this spittle that comes out of the bird's mouth, or some drippings that go into the Mechatos, it is mevatel the Torah's Mechatos. So that the water that comes betiftuf into the kli passes all the water in the kli. Chutz min hayonah. The only bird that's the exception is the dove. Mipnei shemotzetes. It suckles the water, but it doesn't dribble the water back into the kli. V'im isa, if we're going to accept this shmur in the name of Rab Charlafta, that gam kotzis, even a kotzis is not passing the mayim, is nisnei. Why didn't it mention chutz miyona v'kartzis? Mar says lo psikole. There are two categories of kartzis: one that will spit in and one that won't. The gedola, if it's a kartzis gedola, it's larger than a kazayas. Then low pasla. Then it takes the water in, but doesn't spit it back out. Uktana, but it's more than a kizayis, pasla. Because it's metaftev from the peh back into the mind. The yona l'olam ena posels. The adkama, and what is the size of the kartzis to make it into a gedola? The Mishnah says, Rabbi Elazar Omer, Afal pi shein alav edim, el shenasanu b'fnei edim kosher, v'govin nechasim mishubadim, shein al edim chos min al ager elam mipnei tikun olam, Rabbi Yudam, Rabbi Aloch, Rabbi Elazar. The halach is like Rabbi Elazar, which is called Eidei Mesira Karsi, and the get is kosher even without Eidei Chasima, but that's only in Gittin. The Gittin, but not in Shtori Mama. Ki Amrisa Kami de Shmuel, Omar Shmuel said to me, Af B'Shtaris, we're going to pass in like Rabbi Elazar, even with regard to Shtori Mamon, that Eidei Mesira Karsa, and we're going to take the sheet of Rabbi Elazar, hook, line, and sinker, without any exception. So again, Rav says that we don't accept halacha Rabbi Elazar in Shtari Mammon, and Shmuel says we accept the halacha of Eidei Mesira Karsa Rabbi Elazar even in Shtari Mammon. And the Gemara asks the following question: for Rav Sobishtaris Lo Haktani, the Mishnah itself says for Govmin Chasim Mishubadim. So we're obviously talking about Shtari Mammon, Shtari Milva, that are collecting. You can collect the Shibud HaNechasim from the Lekuchos, and you can rely on a star that was handed over from the Lova to the Malva in front of two Eidim, even though there are no Eidim signed on the star. And the Gemara answers Rabbi Elazar Tart. Rabbi Elazar had Eidei Mesira Karsi both in Gittin and in Shtari Mammon. But Rav the Rav only accepted the sheet of Rabbi Elazar in the halach of Gittin, Eidei Mesira Karsi, Polgalei B'chada, but with regard to Shtari Mammon, we need Eidei Chasim. And this apparently is derived from a pasuk, L'man Yomdu Yom Rabim, that the Raya in Shtari Mecher, for example, from the star is based on Eidei Chasim. V'chein Amar Rabbi Yaakov Bar Yidi Amar Rabbi Shimon Levi Aloch Rabbi Elazar B'Gittin Rabbi Yanai Omar Afilu Reach HaGet Ein Bo. If you have a get that doesn't have Eidei Chasima, it's completely possible. It doesn't even generate a din grusha with an Isa L'Kahuna. So Gemara says Rabbi Yanai Leslie Rabbi Elazar, he doesn't accept Eidei Mesira Karsi V'Hoch. How could that be? Rav Yani actually passes like Rabbi Elazar. According to the shita of the, let's say Rabbi Meir and those chachamim that rejected Rabbi Elazar, and they maintain that Eidei Chasima Karse, then this get is completely possible. It doesn't have signatures on it, and therefore afilu reach hagetim, but it doesn't even generate an Iser Grusha L'Kohen. But the halacha is not like the Rabbanan, but rather like Rabbi Elazar. V'chein Amar Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina Amar Reish Lakish, halacha Rabbi Elazar B'Gittin, but not in Shtaros. V'Rabbi Yochanan Amar Afilu Reach HaGet Ein Bo, Lem Rabbi Yochanan Leslie de Rabbi Elazar, Hachi Kamar LeRabbanan Afilu Reach HaGet Ein Bo. Shalach Le Rabbi Abba Bar Zavda LeMari Bar Mar. Boy, me name Rav Huna. Unfortunately, Rav Huna is going to die before he gives the answer, but halacha Rabbi Elazar B'Gittin o ein halacha. Adahachi noch nafshe the Rav Huna passed on. Amalei Rabba Brei, the Rabba, the son of Rav Huna, testifies in the name of his father. Hachi kamar Abba, this is what I heard from my father. Mishmei the Rav in the name of Rav. Halacha Rabbi Elazar B'Gittin. V'chein Rabbi Seinu Abakiya b'dvar halacha. Mishum Rabbeinu Amru halacha Rabbi Elazar B'Gittin. So the language Rav Seinu is Rav Chama Bar Guria and Rabbeinu is Rav. According to another transmission, Rabbeinu Mishum Rabbeinu Amar Allah Rav Elazar B'Gittin. Tiamar Rav Chizda Rav Chama Bar Guria Rav Allah Rav Elazar B'Gittin. And this language of Chavereinu is referring to Rav Chizda, and Talmidei Rabbeinu is referring to Rav Chama Bar Guria. Rabbeinu is Rav. V'chein ki asa Ravin Amar Rabbi Elazar Merav Aloch Rabbi Elazar Begit. And this leads us to the Mishnah on the bottom of Pei Vav Amid Beis. Two people appointed one single shliach to bring two Gittin respectively to each wife of these two Bailim, these two Anoshim that sent the shliach, and it's Arvu, and the two Gittin got mixed up. Now the names are the same, because both Reuven and Shimon have, both Reuvens, I should say, and both Rachels have the same name. So what do we do if there's a mixture, and we don't know which get was written for which woman? Is no sin shneim leish zo u shneim leisha zo? No problem. Give both Gittin to each woman, and then mimanav shalchir covered. Both are megurash. So fichach avad echamem ari aget sheni bot. If one of the two Gittin gets lost, and the second get, we don't know whether it's designated for this Rachel the first or Rachel the second. So therefore the get is batel. What does that mean, the get is batel? It doesn't mean batel mamish. It means that we won't allow giving it to any of the two women, but certainly if they went ahead and gave it to one of the two women, or for that matter to both of them, then you have a suffix gerish. Vaita in the Mishnah, Hamisha shekasvu, 5 men married to 5 different women. Klal b'toch get, they put all of these marriages, these zugot, together in one get, and they wrote ish ploni megarish ploni plonis, etc., etc., etc. V'edim chasum lamata, and the edim signed on the bottom of this long get that has many different couples in it. It's kulam ksher, v'nosin l'kolachas v'yachas. Even though it's one get, each Baal will give that one get, they'll take turns, to his wife respectively. And they're all valid. But if he separated the stories and each zug, each couple, and wrote one below the other, and then Edim Lamata, the Edim are signed on the bottom, then Esa Edim Nikrim Imo Kosh, the last couple, which is mentioned in the get right before the Edim on the bottom, they have a valid get, but not the other couples, with Mechoshesh that the Edim are only testifying on the very last couple. Where it says Mantana, who is the Tana of a Mishnah, who is Machshir a get, when it's given both to this Rachel the first and to the second Rachel the second, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Elazar, it can't be Rabbi Elazar. The Rabbi Elazar came in the Amar Edim Masira Kars, according to him, the Lishma has to be in the writing of the get. And the Edim Masira will know which get is being used for which Megarish and which Miskareshes. But in our case, that the two Gittin got mixed up one with the other. Hello Yade, the Edim Masira have no way of knowing behind Minayu, Kamagarsha. In with which get is he divorcing his wife? So that's not a lishma. Lishma means that it's got to be written l'shem nesina zu, and dafka l'shem nesina zu. So our Mishnah must be reflecting the sheet of Rabbi Meir back on Daf Gimel, who holds Eidi Chasima kars, and lishma is only on the Eidi Chasima, and we don't need a Masir lishma. But according to Rabbi Elazar, there's no takana in these Gittin that got mixed up. Abai disagrees. Afilu teim Rabbi Elazar. Ema de boy Rabbi Elazar ksiva lishma and nesina lishma mi boy. Rabbi Elazar never required nesina lishma. He only required ksiva lishma. Because of law, according to Rabbi Elazar, requires lishma in the ksiva. And each get was written to the right man, for the right couple, the right man and the right woman, and we don't need a Mesir Lishma. The Mishnah goes on and says, Chamisha shekosvu klal is kulam ksherim yinoslu kolachas v'yachas, but tofes kolecha v'echad eidim lamato, it's only esher eidim nikra v'imo kosh echidami klal ve'echidami tofes. Here we have a major machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish how to interpret that Mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan, everything depends upon the zman. If it's zman echad lekulam, that's called a klal. But zman lekol echad v'echad, zeu tofes. What separates the get is because each couple had its own zman written in the get. So the zman separates the get and breaks it into separate gittin, such that now that's called tofes, and the Adam signed only vis-a-vis the last couple. But if there was only one zman for the entire get, which includes 5 different couples, then it's all one get, and the signature on the bottom relates to the entire get for all 5 couples. Reish Lakish Amar, here we turn to Pei Zayin, Afilu Zman Echad Lekulam Nami Avi Tofes. Even if he had only one zman, it still would be considered a tofes. And therefore, the signatures on the bottom only relate to the last couple. And why is this so? Because the get is written in a way that it tells the story separately for each couple. Reuven is divorcing Leah, and Shimon is divorcing Rachel, etc., etc., etc. And the very fact that there's a Sfiras Dvarim for each couple, that makes each Sfiras Dvarim a separate get, and therefore the Chasimas Eidim is only on the last get. So, Hechidomi Klal, according to Reish Lakish, when is it that the Eidim sign on the entire get, Klal, is the cause of Anu Ploni Uploni Gerashnu Nishosenu Plonis Uplonis. There's not a separate Sipur Dvarim on each zug, which would separate the get into many different segments, and the Eidim are only signed on the last. No. They integrated all the stories and all the Sfiras Dvarim, all the couples, into one Sfiras Dvarim. So it's not separate Gittin, but rather one get, and the Eidim are signed on the bottom for the entire get. And this is where we'll stop for today.